Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Asking for a Friend. This is our August edition. We've got Julie and Mossy with us. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
So Asking for a Friend is an initiative by Never Not Creative, Young Bloods, and the Mentally Healthy Change Group. Exists because we want to create a safe place for where you can ask the unaskable. So the questions that you're worried might change the way you're treated at work or affect the opportunities that might be given to you. We're bringing together industry leaders, mental health professionals to give non-judgmental responses in a safe, anonymous environment. So anything you're asking can certainly be for a friend. Before I introduce our guests properly, a little bit of housekeeping. So you'll be able to see in the panel on the right that there is a questions tab. So please, as we go, ask questions. We have quite a few questions that have been sent in beforehand, which are really great, and we're going to tackle those first. But then we'll be getting to the questions that everyone pops into that tab there. So even if you haven't asked a question, make sure that you can upvote a question as well, and we'll certainly answer the ones that are near the top first. The chat is there as well to be able to just nod agreement, share links, any kind of comments that you might have as we go through. And also today we've added a few polls, so feel free to just jump into the polls tab and give your thoughts. We've got a poll around how your motivation levels are right now. How is work-life balance since COVID? So is kind of being at home really good, or is it actually making things worse? Great to see, literally watching these change before my eyes is pretty cool. And also when it comes to your workplace, looking out for your mental health, like how is that as well? So keen to try and understand those things. We might come back to them later in the session. A little bit of a caveat, obviously this is anonymous and we don't know your full context and your situation. So the advice that you get today is based on the fact that we don't know too much. If you need more help, or this might be a way of just getting a good understanding from some amazing people around the steps that you might start to take to make things better for you. And then you can always go off and see a professional, and we'll add some links to help that later on. So with the housekeeping out of the way, I'm delighted to welcome this month Julie Crabtree. Julie is an experienced psychologist who completed her doctoral research in creativity and mental health. Julie's worked extensively with creative people, so it's great to be able to find a psychologist for the session that has lots of experience working with creatives. Also co-authored a book called Living with a Creative Mind. From this experience, she's developed the successful Building Mental Resilience group program for creative artists, and through Zebra Consultancy, which is the consultancy in Sydney, she trains, advisors and mentors creative organizations that want to attract the creative on how to retain and foster a healthy creative environment. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Great to be here. Hi, everyone. It's nice seeing the little chats come through.
It is great.
Yeah.
And we have Anthony Moss. That's the last time I'll say your first name, because that's the only time you get called it. It's usually when you're in trouble with your mum or receiving an EDM, as I understand it. So Mossy's advertising career started in the mailroom at Saatchi & Saatchi Sydney 21 years ago, where he became hooked on the ad industry. Since then, his storytelling ability and creative leadership have taken him all around the world, including assignments in Japan, Germany, Spain, and a 6-year stint in the US, working for Crispin Porter & Bogusky and Gotham Inc. Mossy's worked on some of the most influential brands on the planet, including Microsoft, Coke, American Express, Burger King, and more recently, AGL, Gillette, Telstra, Mercedes, and Kmart, and joined DDB Melbourne 18 months ago as a group executive creative director, helping transform the agency with a series of high-profile new business wins. Welcome, Mossy.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And we have Sydney and Melbourne represented. So Mossy is forced to be at home at the moment. So thank you for joining us whilst you're in lockdown.
My pleasure.
So we're going to hit the questions that came in first anonymously via the site. And so if you're ready for next month, make sure you can get your questions in early as well. But we'll start with quite a big question that goes to you first, Mossy. So as a female in Adland working in account service, pretty experienced at 30, of a racial minority and recently a returning to work mom, how does one remain motivated to thrive and progress in this industry where everything feels like I'm already on the back foot?
That is a huge question to start with. I think, firstly, congratulations on motherhood and returning to work. I think that's a huge part of trying to get your identity back after becoming a mum. I know when my wife went through it, and we've got 2 kids. Getting her own body back and getting her own kind of schedule back was a huge thing for her, and a big part of her kind of self-worth, I guess, was going back to work and feeling like you're contributing again, not just listening to the Wiggles on repeat and talking baby talk. I think there's a couple of things in that question that you can really use to your advantage. I think being, a part of a racial minority, are there agencies that need your racial insights and your cultural background to communicate better to a certain demographic? I think as a general rule, the industry is slowly moving to a more diverse workplace or workforce because government are making changes and quotas, especially when it comes to Indigenous employment. But also clients are demanding it, gender diversity, age diversity. I think trying to use your individuality to your advantage, and I guess also remembering that as a mum, you've probably gone through challenges that are much bigger than anything you'll ever face at the office. So using that strength and resilience to your advantage at any point, I think, is the way to probably motivate yourself that that nothing can stop you.
Julie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I will. I thought that was a great response, Mossy. What I notice is that we know from research that a diverse group is a much better problem solver. A diverse group is able to provide a depth and perspective that a very kind of one-dimensional group can't. So I would be really encouraging you to think about yourself rather than these are negatives that I've got to overcome. You're actually bringing in some real positives, that you are bringing in perspective, understanding. You are bringing in that wonderful sense of, I'm here doing work, but the thing that's most important to me is at home. That's an incredible perspective. And I would really start thinking about yourself as somebody that is bringing in something that the industry wants and values. And I think that starts with your confidence in yourself and who you are and what you bring. So I would really encourage that.
I think also we've all proven, and the fact that the 3 of us are here chatting today, you can be productive from home. You can work from home. You don't need to be in an office. You don't need to be doing 9 to 5 hours. So I think also finding an employer that embraces that and giving you the freedom and the technology to be able to do things on your terms, on your hours, means that you can still be a fantastic mum and still be a really valuable employee, and then surely it's win-win.
Yeah, great. The next question has come up a few times in recent months. I'm going to put this to you, Julie. So I really want to stay motivated and go above and beyond in my job. But since we've been working from home, I felt really sluggish, not very excited to make great work. And I find myself just doing the bare minimum some days. What can I do to keep myself motivated?
I think motivation is one of our key areas that we need to keep track of. And the only person that can motivate you is you. And so taking responsibility for our own motivation. In fact, I'd say for all those listening, rate out of 10 your motivation. Kind of keep track of it. And I like to think of motivation as like a muscle that we need to keep exercising. Motivation is important because it's connected to dopamine, which is connected to depression. So it's really important for us to keep our motivation up. And we do that by kind of simple things. And what I encourage people to do is when you get up of a day, you just notice the things that you enjoy. Now, we used to go out and spend time with friends, and that was what we enjoyed, and that would kind of motivate us, give us energy. We can't do that as much now. So we have to shift how we enjoy things. Do we enjoy the smell of the coffee in the morning? Do we enjoy the spring flowers that are coming out? Do we notice that? All of these things help us take pleasure in the things that and give us a sense of enjoyment. And as we enjoy things, as we take pleasure in things, so we can get motivated for things. The key to motivation is reward. How are you going to reward yourself? So getting up and starting a task, and then say, I'm going to sit down and do a task for 2 hours. How are you going to reward yourself? Not with chocolate, but other things. How can you reward?
Sometimes with chocolate.
Yeah. When you finish at the end of the day, what's going to be your small reward? Because again, reward is linked to motivation. The other thing that I would do is just keep a structure, routine. Get up at the same time, get dressed, do a routine, because that also will help you get started again. When we lose that routine, we lose the kind of, it's like the petrol that keeps us going. So keep a routine, look after the things that give you pleasure, and give yourself small rewards as you go through your day.
Yeah, I've found also, some people work better at different times of day. If you find that you're really productive straight after breakfast, then, try and get those really important projects done first thing in the morning when your energy's up and your motivation's up, and you can kind of belt them out quicker. Whereas if you're more of a night owl, sleep in the morning and do the work, later at night, that's fine. As long as, you're finding, your own rhythm, I think, and what motivates you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lockdown's sort of proven to us, hasn't it? And to every company, I think that, you can trust people to do the work. I saw a article the other day, I think it was from Siemens, talking about how they were going to change their leadership style, and how it was going to turn much more to outcomes, because it was a lot less about being in the office or being in front of a screen, but more about the the work that you ended up delivering. Yeah. I think that's a big change, and we've got a lot more trust, I think, for the people that work for us as a result. Julie, someone's referenced the recent research that we've done with the Mentally Healthy Change Group recently, and they've questioned, are we exaggerating the results a little bit? So aren't creatives predisposed naturally to more anxiety and symptoms of mental ill health?
To answer the first part of that question, that's not an exaggeration. In fact, every consistent survey that's been done in Australia and overseas always scores the creative high with anxiety and depression. And there's two reasons for this. One reason is that when we're looking at stresses, we're looking at an industry where there is often very uncertain job and money rewards. That increases our stress straight away. The other thing is that there is no other industry where you have to come in and make something up out of nothing. That puts quite unique stresses on us. And again, the thing that you make up is being constantly evaluated. It's a massive stress. A lot of what we do is kind of alone for some of you. And so the industry creates unique stresses. We also know that we are wired in terms of our cognition, in terms of our personality, to be a little bit more prone to anxiety and depression. In terms of our thinking, creative people think fast. They imagine an awful lot and they make a lot of connections. Brilliant for being creative, not so good for anxiety. So we have to keep that in train. It's like having a bridle on a horse. You've got to keep track of your fast thinking, of your imagination, and so that you don't move into really anxious thinking. The other thing is, in terms of personality, we feel pain deeply, our pain and other people's pain. We're very, very sensitive. Essential for being creative. But we know it's also linked to depression and anxiety. So learning to look after our ability to feel our own pain and feel other people's pain deeply. So what I would say to people sometimes, if they're going through a difficult time, which we all do, you may not need to spend a lot of time listening to your friend's pain as well. Not all the time, because you're going to feel it. You're going to carry it. It's going to be harder for you. So just learning to manage your own emotions, because out of those emotions are your fuel for creating. But you can also easily get quite flat and low and depressed or anxious.
I think on top of that, those really great examples of different pay scales and high pressure, quick turnaround. In advertising especially, we don't go into a meeting saying, here's your one ad, that'll be, $100. It's not like, a dentist that says, this is what you need, I'm going to do it, and you're going to pay me for that one option. We go in with a suite of options, a range, and we know that most of our babies are going to get killed in each meeting, for whatever reason. So, I think that anxiety is, heightened when you know that you don't always have it your way. You put your blood, sweat and tears into this. There are sleepless nights involved in it and, pressure. But even then, it's not always good enough, or it's not always going to see the light of day. So I think, that can, I guess, dial up the predisposition to anxiety and depression, because the nature of our business is such a challenging and difficult one. Mm-hmm. We love it.
There's the next question follows on quite nicely from that one, which is, and I'll go to you first, Mossy. How do we use paranoia as a positive force? So obviously there's quite a lot of paranoia as a creative, which is, I guess, in some ways as well quite good, because it's it's good curiosity as well. Yeah. But so often it can be debilitating, and it seems common for creatives. So how do I use it for good?
Yeah, I mean, I often talk to my teams about a healthy paranoia, not healthy paranoia, and to talk about motivation, as Julie was touching on earlier, that muscle, trying to use that healthy paranoia as the motivation to do better, or to impress even more, or to try things differently, or to present it better. And I think if you're walking into a presentation room and you don't feel the butterflies, or you're not a little bit anxious or a bit sweatier than usual, then I think there's a problem. I think that healthy paranoia keeps you on your toes and keeps you at your best. I think it's a really fine line when it switches into an unhealthy paranoia, which is when you feel paralyzed and you don't know where to start, and you feel like you're lost, and there's this confusion that kind of keeps driving your head round and round in circles about, am I good enough? How did I land this job? I don't deserve this. All those kind of negative thoughts start to swirl around, which is clearly the unhealthy side of paranoia. So, even though I might not always show it when I'm in a room presenting work to a client, I have a healthy paranoia about, what is it that I really need to land to that specific client that's going to change their mind and buy what we're trying to sell, or convince them that this is the right thing to do. And I think the same goes with most parts of our industry, that healthy paranoia to keep you on your toes and keep you trying to do a bit better, and win that next bit of business, or sell that next script, or win an award. It's a really good motivating factor.
To add to that, in fact, there's like a hierarchy of paranoia. And what you want is not to go up the hierarchy, because at the top of the hierarchy is like a lot of mental ill health. But I'd be very, very conscious of how much you are engaging with social media, because it can really increase your paranoia. For example, if you posted something and you keep on checking to see how many likes you've got, or if somebody's commenting, or why hasn't somebody commented because you thought it was really good, like that's really increasing your paranoia. Are they judging me? Do they think I'm not good enough? So I would there's a couple of things that I've been monitoring. One is your social media use. The second thing is that I'd be aware of ruminating. Ruminating is like going round and round the same track, and that can escalate your paranoia. And you're obsessive. This is very much the social media stuff where you're obsessive checking with things. So as Mossy was saying, the healthy kind of paranoia is great. Keep it in the room. But I would keep really strong track of social media obsession, obsessive thinking and rumination, so that you don't go up the hierarchy.
Someone's literally just posted something very quickly, Julie, which is, but how do we avoid rumination?
There's a very old technique that I think is an old but good technique, and it's called thought stopping. And it's because we often think that we can't control our thoughts, but we can. And when we think things, it produces emotions and a body reaction. So there is a lot of advantage to keeping control of our thinking, because otherwise we pay a huge physical cost through sleeplessness, through just wear and tear on the body. This is a really simple technique, and that is close your eyes, imagine a stop sign, trace it around the stop sign, and then trace round the S and the T and the O and the P. Think about what colours you would use. Think about the border around it, and just imagine it. Now, it's a really simple technique, but it's helpful, because when you put a stop sign up, you stop the rumination. And it's I like to think of it as like a train track. And it's like you keep on going around this old familiar train track, like our neurocognitive processes. And what you're doing is you're putting up a stop sign and stopping that track, because the more you wear that track down, the deeper the rut in your brain is. So we're trying to stop the rut. And a simple way is just a simple stop sign. Now, it may only work for a couple of seconds, but that's good. The more you practice it, the easier it's going to be for you to keep doing it.
Yeah, great. Mossy, as someone who's pretty high up the chain, this question is for you. How do I deal with feedback from a boss that is so many levels above me? I think this comes from people who are sort of, towards the bottom of the ladder early on in their career, and that there's almost potentially this kind of, someone like you's up on a pedestal, and there's fear of, oh my God, the boss talked to me. How should they deal with that?
Well, Andy, as you mentioned in the intro, I started in the mail room, and there was no lower rung than me, literally emptying dishwashers and stacking fridges. And all I wanted to do was be in the creative department. So for me, it was a blessing when an ECD would talk to me and give me feedback. So I think what you've got to do is look at someone, regardless of how many layers in the hierarchy above you they are. If an ECD or a CCO or a CD is investing time in you to give you feedback, that means that they care. And each bit of feedback is a small investment in not only you as a creative, but the work that's going to come out of you and them and that agency. So I think it's a great thing. If you're getting feedback from someone more senior than you, embrace it, listen to it, and keep asking for it. And I think the important thing to know is there are probably, in my life, I give two different types of feedback. One's a direction, which is do this. This is the answer. Don't come back to me unless this has been done. You can show me other ways as well, but do this and then try other things. The other bit of feedback is a suggestion, which is, have you tried this? Or I'd approach it this way, or don't say that word because it's too negative. Say this word and try, making it more positive. So knowing the distinction between a directive and a suggestion will clearly distinguish, I guess, what that person who's more senior than you is trying to get out of you. But I think knowing that they're trying to help you is the first start, the first kind of thing to know that I'm not in trouble. Feedback is not a punishment. It's actually a real gift that, I'd be worried if they weren't talking to you, if they weren't giving you feedback. That's when you think, right, I'm a dead end to them. They're not going to waste my time with me. So that's the issue. Getting feedback from someone more senior definitely isn't something to be scared of, and it's not something to, I guess, deal with as the question stated.
Yeah, great. Julie, next question's for you. Our studio moved to shorter working hours to achieve work-life balance, which is in inverted commas. It all looks good on paper. However, I haven't seen any real changes in the studio showing that this is being taken seriously. I found myself working much longer hours in lockdown than when before the COVID-19 situation started, and I actually feel more stressed now than before. How do I broach this topic without sounding like I'm challenging my bosses?
And that's a kind of a really, in some ways, a complex question, because I think there's a way that you would deal with it if you were all together in the office. You would find a way, you would talk to your boss. These are very unusual and uncommon times. And I think firstly, recommending that everyone is under stress at the moment is a very kind of chaotic, unusual time. And so recognizing that we are all under stress is really helpful. one of the things that I found helpful in talking about stress is this idea of a formula, which is a stressor, which is the demand on me, plus my individual makeup gives me my stress response, which is the fact that I feel stressed. So we can actually do different things, under each of those aspects of the equation. One of the things I would be asking is, are you bringing anything to your stress? Are you putting a demand on yourself? Are you perceiving a demand? Are you being perfectionistic about things rather than just having great attention to detail? Are you bringing more stress than it should be? And also in terms of your stress response, what are you doing to help that? Are you exercising regularly? Do you have a mindfulness technique? I really recommend Calm app as a great mindfulness technique. So are you doing those things to help your own stress response? And then we come to the demand on you. And I've encouraged people to do when they have to have those difficult conversations with bosses is firstly the way you come to the conversation. And the best idea is to come with a solution. Don't just come with a problem. And you come in a very kind of gentle way, and you say a whole lot of positives. Like clearly they're a workplace that has a commitment to a work-life balance. So you affirm that, you encourage them with that. And then you say, look, I'm really finding it hard to know how to bring that into my day-to-day life given the current circumstance. And you talk about solutions. Can we find different ways of doing this? Because as soon as people feel that there's a confrontation, their defenses will go up and they won't hear you. So you need to find an approach which is finding a solution to the problem rather than here's your problem, fix it for me. So I think that shift can be really, really helpful. You'd probably add something to this, Mossy, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, and I think work-life balance is defined as different things in different workplaces. So I think potentially asking what the studio managers or owners define as a work-life balance and seeing how they're applying it themselves in their own lives might give you a way in for that discussion and the solution, going to them with a solution. And if your life balance component of it is more time with your family, putting it in their terms about, you pick up your child from school every Wednesday, I'd like to do that too by taking my child to their, soccer practice every Thursday. So kind of giving them examples and putting a structure around what that means and when the office, the studio can expect you to be on and when they know that you're off. I think that's really helpful.
Can I just add something as well? And that is when we're working from home, we have to think really carefully about boundaries because those are blurred. And so we have to put in place our boundaries. When are you going to access your work emails? When are you going to switch off from work? When is your work zone and when is your home zone? And you have a really distinct connection between those two so that you know when you're at work and you know when it's your personal life. The bleeding of those things does not help your mental health. So even now just thinking about, okay, for me, I don't have my work email on my phone. I actually have to engage with my email on my computer to be at work. And there is a really clear distinction for me when I'm at work and when I'm at home. And this has to be a boundary that we have to think through really carefully when we're working from home.
I'll show my age here, but I'll give you an example of when I remember those boundaries changing. When the first iPhone came out, my ECD at the time got one. And it changed everything because every Friday afternoon we would go to the pub for lunch. And if you weren't at your desk, so if someone called you on your desk phone and you didn't answer, or they emailed you and you didn't respond, then you were out. They couldn't, do much about it if you had to respond to an email. But I remember the day we were at the pub for lunch and my boss got an email on his iPhone and it was like, come back, we needed this, urgent solution. And, those boundaries had shifted. And I think you're right that in this kind of world of lockdown and working from home, you can't see you know, if someone's at their desk or working and you know, shooting an email over might make them think, oh, I better respond because I've got this email. So I think, yeah, open communication and setting those boundaries is a great, simple solution.
And you mentioned too, expectation. You know, a lot of people have said to me, I feel like I need to send an email to my boss at 6 o'clock so he knows that I'm really working hard and beyond. You know, that may not be an expectation. So really, I think clarifying expectations is really helpful.
Yeah, I'll never forget the time it felt like I had to have the BlackBerry on my person at every single moment of the day. Yes. So we've got a couple of questions left to go that were sent in beforehand, but what I'm just going to ask to make sure that everyone who's listening gets some questions into the questions tab, because we'll be coming to those soon. Interestingly, so how is work-life balance at the moment? It's very evenly split actually. So there's about almost a third, which is that it's better, or it's just gone down. It was a little bit better since COVID, about the same, and then 35% saying that it's worse. How are people's motivation levels right now? There's 10% of us that are pumped. There's half of us are taking it each day as it comes, and then about 30-40% around on struggle street, or really finding it hard to get up and start each day, which I think is, you know, perfectly understandable at the moment. Hopefully the advice so far is helping there. And, you know, pretty good results there on the workplace, looking out for your mental health. So a quarter of people saying it's the best place to work. They're really lucky. 35% saying it's fairly good. 25% going, they don't make things worse, which actually, when it comes to workplaces, is one of the key things. You don't necessarily have to make things better. You just have to make sure that, you know, you're not making things worse. And then about 14% of those saying that work is one of the main issues that they face at the moment. So please get your questions into the questions tab. So I'm going to come to you, Mossy. This is a really straightforward question. What strategies do you use for creative block?
I'd say there are probably two strategies that I use. The first one is to walk away, go away from that challenge. It's a bit like when you're trying to go to sleep at night. Telling your brain go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep is a surefire way not to go to sleep. So I think trying to bang your head against this, you know, creative block is just going to get you more frustrated and anxious with not being able to crack it. So I'd say get away, go, you know, watch a movie, pour a cup of coffee, you know, whatever it is to kind of take your mind off it. I think the Calm app is a great way to kind of just reboot the brain, you know, listen to a podcast, whatever it is, but don't keep banging your head against that one brick wall. The second one I think would be to talk to people about it. And you know, the beauty of being in a creative team is that a writer and an art director end up forming almost a third person, because if I start saying, oh, how about this? My partner says, oh, I thought you were going to say this. You get to a third opinion that neither of you would have gotten to alone. So whether it be talking to your creative partner or potentially talking to the strategist or even the client, you know, the account management team, just talking to someone about the problem, because there might be something you've missed. There might be a fresh way of thinking about it that, you know, you're kind of so stuck in your rut about that you can't see. So yeah, I think either walking away for a period of time and rebooting, or just talking about the challenges and what you're stuck on, can really help.
Can I add to some of the other, and this is kind of like a broader perspective, and that is one of the things that creative people have is curiosity, and it's incredibly important. And when people feel that their creativity is stunted, I said become curious again. You know, even for those of you kind of listening, just go sit down and go, right now, what am I curious about? And follow that down, because all the time your curiosity helps you fill what's called the well, which is your memory bank of experiences, and from that you draw on for your creative spark, for your creativity. And right now it's a challenge because we're not going out, we're not seeing things, we're not visiting art galleries. So we have to work a bit harder on filling our will and filling this memory bank of experiences. And so I go, if you're feeling stuck, follow your curiosity and go and do some different things that you haven't done before, you know, and be conscious that part of what you're doing is filling your will.
It'd be nice, Julie, if there was a go sign that you could envision in your head and trace just getting straight over the creative block.
Well, one of the things is I would trust on your own creativity, because we know the things that help us be creative. And one of those things from a personality point of view is openness to experience. You cannot be creative without being open. So that's why I'm talking about this idea of being exploratory. Just explore, even if it's we're allowed to go out and exercise, even if it's your local park. You know, I have been discovering my local area, and it's really interesting. And I would never have found that out if this hadn't have happened. So explore, explore.
I think the other good thing is to, and with a few of the things that we've been talking about so far, is to just word up the people around you, because sometimes when you're in the middle of, a creative block, or, you're having a certain kind of like quite deep experience of depression or anxiety, it's quite hard for you to sort of look outside. But if you've been able to say to people around you, look, I might go through this now and again, and here's what you can do to help me, it can be really quite empowering, because sometimes you just need that little nudge to get out of it.
In fact, we talk about it as tides, that creative people naturally have high and low tides. And we talk about navigating the tides. So if you've got a flat low time, and it's normally after, you've had the pressure on, like, know it's your low tide and do different things in your low tide, and trust that you're going to come back into your high tide again. That can be really, really helpful.
So last question for you, Julie, before we get into some of the audience questions. Do you have any advice for combating the overwhelming sense of futility in the current state of the world? There's a global scream for equality across the board, but nothing seems to make an impact.
I read this morning, I thought it was really powerful, that Michelle Obama said she's got kind of this low level of depression because of the impact, not just of the pandemic, but also of her distress over the injustice of what's around her. And I think it's worthwhile just acknowledging that, and finding ways to manage it, because, there's no one else that can manage your mental health like you. That is the one thing that you're in control of. So having newsfeed free days, if you're highly sensitive to that, just don't watch the news for a little while, to give yourself a break, because we feel so much. If we keep on pressing our feeling button all the time, we get worn out. So giving ourselves a rest from it, giving ourselves a rest from caring so much, it allows us to care when it's important for us to care. So I would manage those things, and I would give yourself a diet of humour and lightness and positivity to balance the sadness. I mean, I think that there will be a lot of time where we as a nation and as a world will grieve things.
I think social media free days might be a good suggestion too, as well as news free days, because you're right. I mean, we go from bushfires to COVID to explosions in Lebanon. I mean, it's just one thing after the other. Black Lives Matter. I mean, all these kind of terrible things that are happening. And I think social media is a news source for a lot of people too, and it's clearly that person who's posting, it's their opinion on the world, which kind of helps to dial up that kind of feeling of futility and the world's gone mad and when's it ever going to end.
One of the things we understand as psychologists is there's vicarious trauma, because we're hearing so much kind of sadness. And so what we have to do is manage that for ourselves and find that. Now, in some ways, we've got a collective vicarious trauma. And I think we have to find ways for ourselves to manage our own sense of sadness and grief, because it's not going to help if we end up getting very depressed and discouraged and hopeless. That's not going to help anyone. So taking time out, enjoying things, I think to help us with that is important.
I think you can also get quite active in improving your social media feed as well.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of it naturally comes into sort of bad news, but there are like, I have a group that I follow called Moods of Silence. And they're basically, it's people just posting these like amazing videos of just being in a forest where nothing else is happening. And there's like snow falling and that kind of stuff. And there's another one, which is the kindness pandemic, which is like a response to what's been going on at the moment. It's just lots of people doing good things for each other. So I think you can also like improve the balance of your feed, which is a good idea. Okay, so we're now into the questions from the audience. First one with lots of upvotes. So upvotes do get you to the top. But I think this is a question we'll start with for you, Mossy. So before a presentation, I sometimes feel myself getting anxious, sometimes tipping into the unproductive side. What are some remedies to help with this?
That's a great question. I think with anything, it's practice. It's funny because as Andy said in the intro, I lived in America for 6 years, and being the Aussie in America, that they thought my accent was exotic for some reason. That Americans love an Aussie accent. So when it came to presentations, they just shove anything in front of me and make me present to the client because they thought it sounded a bit more sophisticated than when they presented it in their American accent to an American client. And at the beginning, that used to really freak me out because, you know, they'd laugh at the way I'd say the word burger instead of burger, and, you know, things like that, you know, added to my anxiety. But the more I did it, the less it kind of bothered me because, you know, I guess like anything, you get better at it, you get more comfortable with it. So I think just presenting as much as you possibly can is a really good way to just get used to that feeling. But something else that I always remind myself, I've never walked into a presentation room with the audience that I'm presenting to wanting me to fail. And I think it goes from the same from an audience at a, you know, year 7 school concert to, you know, speaking at the UN. It's not like the audience want you to trip up and they want to catch you out and they want to film you and post you on YouTube as this idiot who screwed up this presentation. They want to hear from you, especially in advertising. We're so lucky that a lot of the time our clients are really looking forward to the creative presentation. It's like the highlight of their day or week a lot of the time. They want you to succeed. So walking into that presentation knowing that they're rooting for me, it's not the enemy, it's not like someone's waiting for me to trip up and fail, gave me a lot of confidence and just made me want to put on an even better show for them.
For years, I would always practice like the worst case scenario, which is even if I'm going in and I'm not the one presenting, I would think, like, what if someone called in sick? I'm going to have to prepare for that presentation. And so I've always put myself in a position where, like, if someone just suddenly faints, I'm going to have to take over. And it's funny, like, as you do that, you get used to kind of then looking at, as you watch a presentation in front of you, even just going, oh, okay, yeah, that's what I would have done, or, you know, how would I do things differently? And it was because once a boss of mine took me to a huge marketing society dinner in London. And like I was a year in, I think, into my career, and he told me, like, jokingly, I thought in the taxi on the way, have you got a question for Rory Sutherland, who was talking at the event? And I was like, oh, yeah, right. And when Rory finishes his speech, and someone goes, oh, are there any questions for Rory? And I'm looking around, and my boss literally lifted my arm up in a room of, I don't know, 300 people. And suddenly I had to come up with a question. I did the whole, you know, red face, red neck, everything. I've never, ever wanted to experience that ever again, which means every time I walk into a room, I know I've got a question or I'm ready to take over at any single point.
Yeah.
It's helped me a lot through the years.
Because that's a technique called imagery rehearsal. And so they'd be the things that there'd be a couple of things that I would add to what you said. One is rehearse you're doing it. You've got a great imagination, so use it. So rehearse in your imagination you're doing it well. See yourself standing up with a calm voice, delivering it positively. The other thing, as soon as you stand up, breathe deeply, because when you breathe deeply, it shuts down your stress response. And it helps to slow down not just your breathing, but your voice and the speed of what you're saying. The other thing that I would do is look up, because when we look up, it can lift us up even emotionally. So there's just simple things that you can do that can help you present well.
Yeah, great. All right, next question. Networking with new people, especially more senior creatives, has felt impossible since COVID. How can I overcome the extreme professional and personal isolation? Mossy, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And it's probably something that the people that the senior creatives that you want to network with that probably have to step up here. And there was something I was involved in when we first started lockdown, which was called the interview before the interview, where a bunch of ECDs and CCOs recorded interview questions to prepare people who were, losing their jobs thanks to COVID, who maybe haven't been in a job interview for a long time, to be ready for when they are, interviewing again. And I think networking is a real challenge in these circumstances. I think you can still stay connected to the industry through, a range of blogs and a range of, websites that are about the industry. I think there are Facebook groups about it. Some of the junior creatives that I know have a kind of networking group where they regularly have video catch-ups and that sort of thing. But also, I think, reaching out to people on LinkedIn and asking for a chat or asking for an email or asking for advice is something that you should look at. I wouldn't necessarily expect an answer straight away, depending on that person's circumstances at their own work and their own life. Might mean I'll get to you in a day or two. But yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if that answer has really solved it, but I think giving up is the worst thing you could do. I think just putting yourself out there and doing it digitally is probably the way to do it.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people actually offer their time as well on LinkedIn, so it's worth following the people that you want to chat to and just see whether they have put those offers out there. Yeah. Next one is a popular question, definitely with the creative industry, certainly. So some days I'm wondering how on earth I'm getting away with getting paid for what I do. Others, I think I'm a demigod, which is ridiculous. What are some tips for overcoming imposter syndrome? Julie, do you want to start us off with this one?
I think you described really well the fact, I talked about the tides, the up and down, and that means that you can at one point person feel like you're invincible, and then you can feel like you're worse in the world. That's part of that tidal quality of it. And I think to not have that tidal nature is I think hard, because you need to sell what you're creating, so you need to have confidence in yourself, but it's very natural to kind of question yourself afterwards. So I think firstly accepting your highs and lows. The thing that you need to do is make sure that they're not out of control. So you don't want to have an unrealistic view of yourself where you think you're incredible and so you're that you're not teachable. So keep that humility, that willingness to learn. We know that one of the aspects of resilience is being a lifelong learner. So just position yourself to always be learning. And then if you plummet down into the I'm terrible, this is terrible, what am I doing here? I'd have some strategies around that. And one of them would be that you've got somebody that you can be vulnerable with, who can be your support person and coach, and you talk to them about that. I think the other thing is recognizing that everyone else most in your industry feel exactly the same way. And so recognizing it's a really common thing for you to feel like that. I mean, imposter syndrome is a complex a complex thing. And but I think having people who you are vulnerable with, who you can be authentic with, who it's safe to communicate those things is a really important kind of first step for that.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of healthy paranoia that I was talking about. And I think it's a healthy paranoia, what you've said, because you haven't said, I'm an imposter, I'm getting paid for doing something that I don't know what I'm doing. You've described it as imposter syndrome. So I think you know that you're very good at your job. Some days are better than others, fine. But, you know, feeling like a demigod at some times is proof that you're probably getting some of it, if not most of it, right. So I think that healthy paranoia that, you know, you can use as a motivating factor is fantastic. I wouldn't shy away from it. I wouldn't be embarrassed by it. And I think some briefs you're going to, you know, crack faster and better than others. And that's okay. We all fall into that same boat, as Julie said. We all feel it.
Do you still get it now and again?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I mean, I find myself in rooms of people that I admire, and I kind of go, how am I in this conversation? I mean, you know, things like this where I get asked to talk to, you know, people about mental health and, you know, coping with change and adversity. I mean, I feel like, well, how did I get into this position? You know, why am I here? Not because I don't want to be here. It's like, why was I chosen? So yeah, totally.
The other part of that is, if you always felt that you're a demagogue, what damage would you do to yourself and people around you? You kind of need the balance of those things. So again, it's working with the balance of it.
Yeah, great. So the next question is, I think it's across two questions. So I'll pull this together. So this is someone who's taken a break from the design world for the last couple of years. They've never worked in the industry over here in Australia and a little bit fearful of it. So I think they've been in Malaysia questioning their skills a lot due to some negative experiences that they've had in Malaysia. So the question is, what can I do to overcome my lack of confidence and take that big step in getting back into the design industry again? Lack of confidence. I'll pull, Mossy, you can have a think about the creative creative ankle. And Julie, do you want to start us off with this kind of, how do you get your confidence back?
And again, when we think about those things, we think of them as steps. You know, you want to get yourself at the top of the steps, but you've got to start at the bottom. So what's your first step? How can you begin to do that? And I would be just starting to practice every day. You know, I would be establishing some sort of routine where you're doing some sort of design or creative work every day. And begin to establish a routine where you know you can start doing it. That's your first step of the ladder. Your next step of the ladder is perhaps showing it to some people that you trust for some feedback. The confidence is what you say to yourself. And along with doing this task every day is, I would say to yourself, you know, this is what I do. This is what I've done before. I know I can design. I'm just getting back into it. So it's your partnering the self-talk with the action to build your confidence. And as you kind of reach out to the next step of asking friends, you're going, I want some feedback. I want positive feedback. I want negative feedback. I want some good evaluation on it, because this is what I need to do to get back my confidence with that. So that's where I would start.
Yeah, I've got very similar feedback. I think just doing as much design as you possibly can is the way to build up your confidence. And I think also, to an extent, you know, design is a fairly cultural thing. So if you're concerned about entering the Australian market and workforce, look at ways that you can be proactive. I mean, you don't need a brief to improve design that's already out there. So I think, you know, a way of building up your portfolio is finding some brands or logos and things that, you know, designs that you don't like and making them better. Not necessarily to try and sell them to that business, but to build your own portfolio and potentially promote yourself when you do start interviewing for work. And I think there's a lot of fun that you can have with design that's not taking yourself or the designs too seriously. I mean, there's constantly examples of an enjoyable one recently that I saw. A designer took Microsoft Word 2000 clip art and redesigned all the football team logos using that clip art. Now, it wasn't an exercise in world's best practice design. It was just a funny reimagining out of context of, you know, Aussie AFL teams and the way a design could be done using very limited tools. So, you know, I think you can have a lot of fun with it and try and make your designs, you know, such that appeal to an Australian audience, and show that as someone coming from Malaysia into Australia, you can see what we maybe miss here in Australia when it comes from a design point of view, and show how strong your design eye is.
I think there's also some really good design communities in Australia as well. So, you know, jump into Facebook, like the Design Kids is a great community. If you join even Never Not Creative, the Facebook group, there's lots of great people in there as well. I think you'll find that it can become quite, it's getting more and more connected, and that there's lots of people there to help each other out, especially now, where it feels like, you know, we're coming together more than necessarily being, you know, more competitive. So definitely worth trying to take advantage of some of the community building that's happening at the moment. So we're actually through all of the questions that have come in. There's probably, if anyone does have one, there's time to ask probably one or two more. I have one which came out of the mentally healthy research that we just finished. And it comes back a little bit to the sort of some of the work-life balance stuff that we were talking about earlier. But we got this verbatim in the research. So for anyone that doesn't know, Mentally Healthy 2020 was a study that we did following on from a study we did in 2018. We had close to 2,000 people take the survey. We found out the levels of depression and anxiety in the industry were particularly high. But one of the people, when they were answering the survey, said that they were trying to find work-life balance in their role, but that their boss said, if you're not prepared to work till 2 a.m. on this or through the weekend, then perhaps you're not passionate enough for our industry. And that feels like, you know, I know that we would probably have to do that. Like, we will need to do that now and again. But what's your view on that, Mossy? Do you think, you've been in this industry now for a long time, like, is that a bit of an archaic attitude, or do you think that is something that we're seeing now for a reason?
I think it's a cultural attitude, and I'm referring to agency culture. I've worked at agencies where that culture is just it's standard. I mean, you drink the Kool-Aid, and if you leave, you'll get frowned upon, literally, if you walk out the door. So I think, I mean, it's really tough. I mean, being a creative, I think any form, whether it be, you know, filmmaking or sculpting or advertising, there's no start time and finish time in a day. I think your body has to tell you when enough's enough for that day. Because, as I said, there's that tipping point where, you know, you're not going to be more creative or productive between midnight and 3 a.m. So at what point is it better off just going home and resting and getting a bit more sleep and hitting it fresh in the morning, or working through the night to try and, you know, struggle with every, you know, word that you have to type and pixel that you have to finesse. So I think it's cultural. I think it's fairly old school in terms of where we've moved as a society, that there's a lot more awareness of mental health and the impacts that's, I mean, that could be technically classified as bullying, essentially, that, you know, you either do this or you don't, get out if you don't. And that's forcing you to do something you don't want to do. So I would hope that there's less and less of that happening. But Andy, to your point, there are times when, yeah, we are there at 2 a.m. and that's the way it is. There are weekends that we have to work. I try and not do that as much as possible, but I think, you know, my team know that every now and then we just have to do it, and we try and take off days when the pressure valve's been released, and you know, take the Monday off instead.
Yeah. Julie, anything? Have you had clients that have come to you that maybe have had that kind of experience in the past?
Yes, and I mean, we know in the creative industries that there are pressure points, and this is an observation. I think you can keep the pressure up for 6 weeks, and then you need to kind of decompress in some ways. So, you know, a creative project, yes, you do work really intensely hard, and particularly when you've got that kind of creative surge, you often kind of push past. But unless you're having the decompression, the time off, you push hard and then a day off, you can't sustain it. And there's things that we know. One is if you're not getting good kind of sleep-wake cycle, it affects your mood and well-being. If you're not getting good sleep, it affects your memory and it affects your ability to create. So you need to have, you're factoring those things in, means that you're not performing well. So putting kind of limits on things when you can will help you perform better. They'll help you be more creative rather than kind of burn out. Because that attitude is short term. It's like, I'm going to push you as hard as I can, and if you burn out, then I'll flick and get the next person in. It's not good self-management. It's not good agency management. So I would be, you know, strongly resisting it.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, I think that's brought us to an end. I think just to sort of sum up, I think some of the great stuff about today has been around this sort of balance of strengths and weaknesses, or positives and negatives, that, you know, we can try to take hold of, like when we are experiencing negative thoughts or things that can be draining to us. That I think, you know, Julie, you said this idea of almost just kind of pulling the reins in, like taking control of the way that you're starting to think about things, and maybe being a little bit more mindful of that in the future. So I think that's definitely, you know, some of the great things is that we're in such an uncontrollable environment right now, that trying to find the things that we can control, and also maybe spotting others around us is a really good thing. So thank you very much for joining us today. Julie, it's been amazing to have you. Mossy, thanks so much for joining us from lockdown in Melbourne. I'm sure everyone would agree that the comments and the advice that you guys have given today have just been fantastic. So I know there's been lots of chat coming through, and we got through all the questions as well, which is great. So hopefully that helps the people that ask the questions. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
That's great. All right. Well, I'll end things there. This will be up on nevernotcreative.org/asking-for-a-friend, probably in the next few days. And you can also see all of the other sessions on nevernotcreative.org as well. So I think this was our 5th today. So we'll be back next month, first Thursday of the month at 12:30. Thank you. Please can you give me everyone's name again? Yes. So we've got Julie Crabtree at the top right, and we've got Anthony Mossy down at the bottom there as well. Feel free to look them up. I put Julie's psychology practice link in the chat as well. And Mossy, anywhere particular that's best place to find you?
I could upload my psychological medical records. Maybe that's not the way to do it. Yeah, I'm at anthony.moss@mel.ddb.com.
There we go. So there you go. You can get in touch with Mossy really easily. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in a month's time. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.